Just a gentle note before we begin. Today's conversation includes discussion of burnout, chronic stress, and how trauma and overwhelm can show up in the body. Please listen in a way that feels supportive for you. You're welcome to pause and come back at any time. Caregiving doesn't only take time, it takes body. A lot of caregivers can do the appointments, the advocacy, the medications, and the paperwork, but their body is quietly keeping a tally. It shows up as tight shoulders that never drop, a jaw that clenches without permission, headaches that arrive like clockwork, gut stress, insomnia, and that feeling of being on, even when the house is finally quiet. And what's hard is that caregivers are often told to fix it with more effort, a better routine, a better planner, more discipline, more self-care. But what if the problem isn't your calendar? It's your nervous system. Today, we're talking about the body's symptoms so many caregivers live with: pain, tension, insomnia, and exhaustion, and gentle, practical ways to start releasing some of what you're carrying. My guest is Dr. Danielle Griffin, a TEDx speaker, the author of Somatic Exercise Made Simple series, and a coach who helps people reduce stress, pain, and survival mode patterns through accessible mind-body practices. Danielle has a doctorate in organizational leadership and a background in high-stakes leadership environments, so she's brilliant at translating somatic work in a way that's grounded and practical. Danielle, welcome to Radiant Moments.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Danielle, I'd love to start with your story because your background gives such a unique lens. You've earned your doctorate in organizational leadership and worked in high stakes or high pressure environments. What were you noticing about stress and burnout in that world?
When I finished my doctorate and for a few years after, I was working in higher education. And in that environment, it was high stakes, high stress in terms of I dealt with a lot of researchers, people who were in survival mode in terms of their next paycheck depended on their grant funding, right? And that was often projected on the people around you. And there was often kind of an elitist mentality in that environment. And some of it was just perpetual because of the nature of the environment. And you could be on the receiving end and not even realize it. But we all work towards a common goal. But because the nature of the work, helping students, helping researchers, getting grant funding, all the things, you never know when your end in terms of your employment or the grant would ending changes in the political landscape. All of these things could play a factor in would I have a job or would I be able to make ends meet, or is the leadership going to change and now the goals of the organization changing, as well as just wanting to be able to progress as a professional and move up the ladder and get higher salary because you're experienced. And ultimately, as we're working, we're also living life and feeling the pressures of taking care of our families. And that doesn't always, especially in the higher education, doesn't always translate in terms of what you have going on at home versus what you have going on in the workplace. Both important for different reasons, but you don't always have the sympathy or the empathy of the people around you and forced to make it work and forced into these stressful situations that can be difficult to manage. And like I said, for some people, it could end up being projected onto others, or you end up lashing out because we're all under different types of stress. And so I learned from my own experience, having gone through the COVID pandemic. I lost my father. I was having to return back to the office as well and not being allowed the time that I needed to help my mom in that caretaking role of my father, as well as I had a newborn as well during that period. And ultimately, I just came to a point where I can't continue to do this. I can't continue to give my all to this place of work and burn myself out. I'm struggling with my own healthcare issues, as well as trying to help take care of my father, take care of my son, as well as helping my mother, who is also struggling to take care of herself during that period. when you have somebody who's has cancer and in hospice as the caretaker, your energy, your nutrients, your everything is depleted during that period of time, and it takes a while to recover even after. And so I found myself trying to manage all the things during that period.
I know that when you are supporting a caregiver, when you're a caregiver yourself and you're also managing your own physical well being, it can be exceptionally challenging to find that balance. It's something that caregivers struggle with day in and day out. And I know you went on to train in hypnotherapy, NLP, yoga, and somatic approaches. What did you learn about the body that changed everything for you?
One of the main things I learned through those practices is that it's okay to let go in various different ways. The first way I learned it was it's okay to let go and hand off tasks to other people. I don't have to do everything. As challenging that may be for some of us, just being able to release so that I can have the mental break, the physical break that I need. There are things that I can delegate to others so that I can rest and recover. And through the somatic practice, I learned what rest and recover is and what that truly means and how to do it. And then through the hypnotherapy practice, that really helped with my mindset in terms of releasing the fear of being able to let go. And like I said, was let go of responsibility, let go of people, right? Holding on to the things, the memories, and that sometimes translated into tasks because I'm continuing to do certain things that I'm not wanting to let go of because of other links or that erase the emotional connection, the memories. So all of it really tied into together secretly, surprisingly, so to speak. And then the yoga practice just gave me more of a breadth of movement, mobility to add to the somatic practice.
So it sounds like it's not just a singular idea, it's multifaceted and gently layered.
Right.
And during that process, I'm gathering that there were moments where you came up against challenges for yourself when you were trying to change the norm you'd had for your life, where you were almost at burnout and you were struggling, to now transitioning to something new. And caregivers are often high achievers by necessity, not because they want to be. So when you hear a caregiver say, I should be coping better, what do you want them to understand?
I think the ultimate thing to understand is that it's a process. Everyone's process is different. We've all got here on a different path. We've got to this position, this state that we're in, some overnight, some taking much longer. And so recognize that it can take that long to get out of it as well. Your relationship with the person that you're caretaking could be different than someone else's. We can't erase that emotion that goes into it. It's not just physical work, like whether it's moving a person or feeding them or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of emotional barriers that we bring, whether it's some resistance or in my case, it was okay, I want to be able to take care of my family, but I also have a job. And so there was this push and pull trying to satisfy the needs of everybody. And so when it came to the point where, at least for my father, my ability to cope was a little stifled because it was almost like a missing piece. I was having to transition my work professional and work life. And oftentimes we struggle during that transition period. What is life going to look like now? How do I rebuild? How do I rebuild myself internally and physically at this point? And sometimes we don't even realize that we need to because we've ignored it for so long. And that was a big piece for me. It wasn't until had to stop. My husband actually brought it to my attention. You're looking old. It's manifesting physically on you, and you need to stop and really assess what you're doing, how you're moving in
Mm.
order to move forward.
It really resonates with me when you said that you don't recognize it until you have to come to a stop, or you don't recognize it until your body goes, I'm sorry, but you've ignored me for this long. And now I'm going to throw a few extra medical in for you just so that you can pay attention to me. And it's been my experience as well that when you ignore it for a really long time, you keep pushing through, you're burning, as they say, the candles at both ends. You're pushing down your emotions, you're ignoring the trauma responses in high crisis situations, you're not able to have the time to breathe long enough to actually manage any of those things. I think it's really important to recognize that if you've been doing this for 15 years and you haven't had an opportunity, and this is like the first time, that might take you a little bit of time to change the patterns and recover your body. And it's not, we live in a society where a lot of people want a snap fix.
Exactly.
But when your body is needing recovery, it's not something that can be fixed in a snap. It's something that needs patience, grace, and time, and trial and error, really, to find what suits and what matches your lifestyle, what matches how you feel, where you are, how much time you have. I want to name the body symptoms carers live with every day because people normalize them until they can't.
That's definitely a good point. We forget what a healthy, normal life feels like because we lived in pretty much this trauma state for so long and continuing to stick with that pain. And when we actually have the chance to release it, we actually think that that's the pain, that that's the discomfort, allowing ourselves to mentally and physically let go of that pain for whatever reason, whether it's because it feels different and it's causing us to have to like sit in that discomfort, or if it's more emotional reasons because of the things that we're holding on to. But sometimes we have to sit with, the release, the understanding that if I acknowledge and have awareness of how I'm feeling, I can actually see a difference. I can feel a difference. I can start to understand the shift, and that this is actually healing me, is actually making me feel better, not worse. But I have to actually physically understand the difference between the two instead of immediately like feeling triggered, like, oh no, I don't want to do that. But once we've had the opportunity to release and our body senses it, that's when we can start moving in the right direction. But some of the things that we feel, some of the symptoms, often, most common, probably the back pain, the shoulder pains, the neck pain. Earlier, you mentioned the clenching jaw, oftentimes digestive issues, whether it be because we're not eating the right things during that period or not eating enough, or it can vary what we put our bodies through. And sometimes it can manifest as allergies, dietary allergies, skin related issues. All these things can pop up for me. I mentioned earlier the high blood pressure. Even though I was active, I was doing yoga, I was eating right, I still couldn't get my blood pressure down. I was still struggling with that, still on medication. It wasn't until I truly started embodying the practice, finding the relief, taking the time I needed for myself, breathing. People don't notice how often they hold their breath. They're working and tensing up, trying to get through the work, and it's like these and then working again. Like, it's okay to let go. It's okay to breathe. Like, your body needs it. That helps release. So yeah, those are kind of some of the main things we start to feel. Another one that I know I experienced was restless leg syndrome, which contributed to my inability or lack of sleep that I had. Even when my youngest one was sleeping through the night, I still wasn't. But it was oftentimes that restless leg, constantly moving and envisioning, as well as just the constantly churning mind. Yeah, the list goes on, the symptoms. And like I said, it's really that starting to have that awareness, like, oh, I'm doing this thing, and it maybe is causing a problem for me or for other people around me, both. And why is this happening? Let me try a few things, like you said, things, assessing it if it fits your lifestyle and doing it long enough. I was having a conversation with someone the other day too. And what have you tried already and how long have you done it? If you said you
Mhm.
did it once, did you really do it?
Did you put enough time into it to give it a chance?
Right. Or did you just try and run away in fear essentially because of whatever hangups you might have about practice? And that's one reason why I do the work that I do is because for a lot of people, there are those barriers in terms of accessibility, making sure that a practice, a healing practice is accessible to all and people aren't scared away because of the environment or the people. These are things we can do in the comfort of our own homes. They're simple. You don't have to have a whole bunch of equipment. You don't have to be an expert in anything to breathe. You just have to have the willingness to try it and kind of do it for a little while to assess how it's making a difference for you.
And I think, like you were saying, there are so many symptoms that stress and overwhelm and burnout can present in different people's bodies, depending on if they have any existing medical needs, if they're healthy, a triathlete. Like everybody has a different response to how stress, trauma, overwhelm show up in the body. And like you were saying, tension, we're talking about the stress showing up in your jaws, your shoulders, your neck, and your pelvis, headaches, which are incredibly common for caregivers, especially when we're in hospitals and we're up all the time and we're not getting enough sleep. And insomnia can be extremely brutal when your body is staying on at nighttime, even when you're exhausted. And I know that restless leg syndrome is a serious condition that is hard to manage, especially when it has the perpetuated cycle of you're not getting enough sleep. And so your legs are even more intense. And I have a friend who has that and suffers from the restless legs, and it is debilitating at times. And it impacts even like daytime from the pain of just the constant moving of the legs.
Yeah.
And I know you also mentioned about gut stress, which is another big thing. So, nausea, irritable bowel syndrome, appetite changes, where when you're in crisis, you don't feel hungry at all, or you feel overwhelmingly hungry, or you don't realize that you've gone the whole day without eating something. And then you're ravenous when you come home and you just don't seem to be able to fix that space that and if someone is thinking, this is just my life now, I'm getting old, my body's hurting, it's normal to feel these things. It's normal to experience all of these moments of discomfort. How do you help them recognize what's actually a stress load signal and not a personality flaw or a weakness?
One of the main things is through the meditative practice, especially with the hypnotherapy or for people that are willing to try it. And some of it is a visualization activity of their life before. And sometimes it might require us going back a ways and to really embody how did I feel before? What did I look like? How did I feel? How did I move? So that you can kind of step into that and see the difference. Have an understanding of how am I living my life now? And how did it build up to this point? Like what changes did I make to get to this point? And it's oftentimes not related to age. There's been habits or things that we put in place that's gotten us here. Again, for me in my experience, one of my big areas that I needed additional support was with my nutrition. And as you mentioned, I kind of was at the mindset well, this is just my life. I'm so busy. I don't really have time to cook meals and not getting the proper nutrients. I know that I need, but I don't know how to make my life work as it is and still do these things. It felt like I'm being asked to do more. I don't know how to get what I need and do more at the same time because I'm at a breaking point. I can't do more. But it wasn't until I had the opportunity to really do that visualization that I don't have to do more. I might actually have to do less. But it's really understanding what that less is and really defining and prioritizing the things that are important so that I can make sure I am getting those nutrients. And then it also allowed me to find affordable resources to get the nutrition support that I needed so that I can make that a healthy habit of feeding myself appropriately as well as my family. So it was a little bit of both going on.
And hearing that part of the journey, which is recognizing is the first step. Being able to pick up when things are not feeling okay and being able to accept that they're not okay in this moment. Is there a classic caregiver day that creates these symptoms, the appointments, the advocacy, the drive home, the dinner and the meds? And why does the body react so strongly, even if the caregiver really looks calm on the exterior?
I would say that the body, we train ourselves to live a certain way. We conditioned ourselves to be who we are. It's not an overnight process. And so to create a new habit, we also have to condition ourselves to do that. And ultimately, once we start, whether it be feeding ourselves nutritionally what we need, or mentally or physically, and our body feels that, especially when we've done it in a way that is holistic, as well as just we all around feel positive about it. Some changes, especially again in my example, like if I'm going to join a gym, sometimes I feel the burden is like, oh, this is additional financial expense and this is additional time. And again, it just feels like more being added instead of a positive impact. But what you can genuinely see, not only is it a positive impact, but I'm improving my life, and I use this word like more in abundance, and that meaning all aspects of my life are being touched from this, then we can really feel positive about it, as well as it's more likely to stick.
It's such a relief to hear this named because caregivers often feel their body is betraying them. A lot of caregivers go to the doctors and get told tests are normal and they leave feeling crazy. Or they get told that it's just anxiety, or they're just feeling sad. Why can someone have real pain and real symptoms even when medical tests don't show a clear cause?
Yeah, that's very common actually. And it really just goes back to that physical manifestation of all the stress, the trauma, the anxiety, all the things being stored in the body and not being able to release them. And so being able to have a practice in place where you can allow yourself the opportunity to start to release and reset, we reduce the likelihood that we're going to the doctor, going to 50 different specialists, trying to identify, like, I'm in pain, this hurts, but with no clear understanding or able to point out why or the cause. Or sometimes it might be even hard to articulate what actually hurts. Like, oh, it's my back. Well, where in your back? Well, my back. But this practice helps individuals, and myself included, really start to treat those symptoms before we get to the doctor, so that if there is something actually going on, we could have relieved the general causes of some of the symptoms and really get down to what's actually causing the problem.
Yes, because even in my own experience, where I had physical manifestations of what was going on, the first assumptions that were made was that it was female anxiety, that I was intentionally not wanting to keep my food in place. I guess in those moments, it feels debilitating not to be believed, not to be heard, and to have assumptions made that aren't actually accurate. And then, after continuing to pursue things and finding out that there is actual medical reasons why this is happening within a body. So, what's the difference between it's all in your head and your nervous system is involved?
Yeah, I think it's that awareness that you start to build. If it's in our head, our minds wouldn't be able to sense the physical sensations. Especially with somatic practice, we can say, okay, I'm feeling it in this area, and I can start to breathe into those areas. I can start to do some movement, or I can visualize it's my belly and the nerves and the discomfort, the triggers that are causing some of this discomfort. And I could start to settle and start to release and relieve that. If it's all in our head, it would never go away. There would be no solution. It might constantly move to different areas, whereas many of us, it's consistently in certain areas. Oftentimes people will carry their stress in specific areas of their body.
Mhm.
And once we start to to do some practices to help manage that pain or those chronic symptoms, then we can find the relief.
And because as caregivers, we can feel really stuck in adrenaline and cortisol, especially when we're having to manage crises, sudden emergencies, or we're constantly switched on because we are aware of the movements of our loved one who we're supporting. We notice the changes when they aren't feeling well. We're able to say to them, "Hey, I'm noticing that you don't look so crash hot today," or "Is there anything that I can do to help? I'm noticing that you're a bit flat today." We're just aware of it because we're making sure that we are doing our job as the caregiver. What does a more regulated body actually feel like? And will it make them less effective?
Yeah, at least to answer the second part first, a regulated body actually can make us more effective and more productive. And not necessarily that we're getting more things done, but we're doing the things that we value or prioritize in a more effective and productive way because that awareness we have. We've prioritized our health and the things that we need in order to take care of our loved ones. There's been many times where I've heard doctors and nurses say, you need to take care of yourself. Otherwise, who's going to be here to take care of your baby? And all of that sound, especially when going through it, like, yeah, I get it. I have things to do. But it wasn't until I learned that, okay, this doesn't have to be an overwhelming task. This doesn't have to be me leaving the house for hours to take care of myself or go get a massage every week or whatever the case, although that may be nice, but we don't
Mhm.
always have the luxury to do that or the time to do that. But ultimately, a regulated mind and body will be able to, like we were saying before, kind of sit in that stillness, that calmness, that relief, even if it's just for a few moments, being able to listen within without being worried. Did he call me? Did I hear my name? Are they crying? We can always go back to that, but we can also just take a few moments. And it's amazing how it works. And it can take some practice. It's easier when people are kind of guiding you through it. It's amazing how we can have the ability to tune things out and really center and focus to find that relief when we need it. And it's not until we actually take those moments to do it where we start to really feel the outcome. And then you just with it and be like, yeah, I was able to find that stillness, even for a few moments.
I think that's so important that caregivers don't want to lose their competence. They want to lose the suffering, but they still want to be able to perform and be the advocate that their loved one really needs. So, being able to hear that being regulated actually can make you more effective, provide you with more bandwidth to provide a higher level of care is really important. And also, it helps you to feel a little bit more inspired that if I look after me, if I take this journey to discover something different, I could be more myself. I could feel calmer in a situation. I could manage things differently. So, I'd love to offer listeners a few gentle tools that don't require privacy, a yoga mat, or uninterrupted 30 minutes. For someone brand new to this, what is a somatic exercise and how is it different from stretching or yoga?
The practice that I encourage everybody to try, at least once and then kind of building on to it is the 90-second pause. So somatic practice is a combination of breath work, meditation, and movement. And in just a short 90 seconds, you can do all three of those things. It doesn't take a 60-minute yoga class to do it. So learning to take some deep breaths, especially if you can take like those deep belly breaths and just exhaling and letting it out. And when you let out the breath, you start to feel a shift in your body. The muscles release, your shoulders fall and relax. And just doing that a few times and just allowing your body to tell you how many times to do it. Don't worry about, okay, I should do breaths 5 times and movement 10 times. Don't worry about counting. Just like breathe and let your body say, oh, that felt good. I want to breathe again. I want to breathe another time. Okay, now I can move on, right? And then once you've done that, assessing where you felt the shift, like, Did you feel your shoulders fall the most? And when they did you feel discomfort in your shoulder? Was there pain? Or did you feel some tightness and stiffness in your neck when you did it? Did you not feel enough of a shift in those areas that you would have liked? And so just doing some gentle movement, whether it be shoulder circles or neck tilts, whatever feels good to you in that moment. And again, kind of using your intuition and awareness to allow your body to say, I think this would feel good if I did that. And oh yeah, that feels really good. I want more of that. Again, just allowing your body to tell you how much you want to do and need to do. And then once you've done that, just closing your eyes, continuing to breathe, and just being aware of how you feel after doing that. What was the change in your physical and mental state? Are you breathing better, right? Are you recognizing your breath and how deep of a breath you take versus what you normally take? Or do you recognize that your shoulders were at your ears when you started and now they were able to lower? Did you notice that you're clenching your jaw and now you have like a little tinge in the back of your jaw because you're holding that tension for so long? And now that you know these things, how do you want to move forward? How do you want to continue? Am I going to do another 90-second pause tomorrow? Or maybe when I wake up, that might feel good. Or before I go to sleep, let's try that. And like I said, just starting to build on it, even if it's just continuing the 90 seconds, maybe you'll start to add a minute or two or up to 10 minutes a day. I believe that helps.
So just so I can reconfirm or provide confirmation of what you're describing is that somebody can be sitting, standing in their car, and they can start with a 90-second process to help with the downshift, to help release the tension in their neck, jaw, and shoulders for starters. And that is to focus on breathing and making sure that it's a deep breath in the lower part of your lungs. So making sure that your belly really expands and you have like a balloon there that you're focusing on, and you're really releasing all of that air back out to help with your reset in your body, and then paying attention to what was shifted. So, for example, if I've got tension all in my shoulders, so is that releasing? Is it not as tight? Do I feel more comfortable in my space and in my body? Breathing a little easier. I'm no longer breathing up here in the top of my chest, and really paying attention to what is doing for your body so that you can see the positive outcomes of these 90 seconds that you're investing in yourself. And it doesn't have to be massive, and it can be repeated more than once depending on what you need in that moment. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah, you nailed it. I would say the one thing, not that it was wrong, that you mentioned in the car, which I definitely do it in the car, but when I'm not driving, preferably. Sometimes I might do a little like, because for me, especially when I'm driving out, I clench my jaw. That is something I'm definitely aware of. So often when I'm driving, I try to do some exercises for my jaw, like neck, shoulder, stretching of the jaw. But just in terms of like obviously closing our eyes and all the things to completely reset, I have to wait till I'm
We're
done.
stopped. Yeah. So before you leave the appointment, for clarification, because we like all of our listeners to stay safe and get home safely, either before you leave the appointment or when you get home from the appointment, that's when you create this space for yourself, not whilst you're driving, because having your eyes closed is dangerous indeed. I'd like to ask, what would be one gentle option for sleep? Something that helps the body feel safe enough to power down at nighttime, especially for those of us who have racing thoughts about all of the things that we didn't get done in the day.
For me, a huge part of my practice, as well as regaining my health, was sleep hygiene. And so it wasn't just doing the somatic practice in the evening that helped. It helped down regulate, like you mentioned. But one problem that I had faced was staying asleep or falling back to sleep. Even if I woke up maybe to use the restroom, I'd find that I'd be up for another 2 to 3 hours and my sleep was shot at that point. And so making sure that my environment was conducive to sleep. And it can take some trial and error, whether it's having white noise or some sleepy music that helps. A sleep mask, an eye mask often helps for a lot of people. One thing I learned is, some of us are light sleepers, but some of us also, our eyes don't necessarily seal shut
Mhm.
all the way. So light creeps in easier. And so we often have light sensitivity. So if there's other things in the room that maybe are flashing or just like a solid red light from a TV or a phone flashing or things like that, that can jolt us out of sleep. Or if we wake up, that could help or prevent us from falling back to sleep. Doing things to like cover up those lights or blackout curtains or whatever the case may be. But the biggest thing, especially when it came to falling back to sleep for me, was the breath work, the breathing. When I would wake up, sometimes my mind would start thinking about the things.
Mhm.
I would try to avoid picking up my phone. Sometimes I feel like, oh, well, an hour has passed. I need to do something to fall back to sleep. But if you do anything, like don't pick up your phone, but, but focus on the breath, like those deep, slow breathing. That's what's actually going to help induce the sleep. When we
Mhm.
wake up, our breathing patterns start to normalize into what our kind of normal daytime breathing is. But we need those deep, slow breaths. And once we've slowed our breath, we start to slow the mind. And doing that repeatedly, focusing on the breath, even if you feel like you got distracted and start thinking about something else, bring it back to the breath. Eventually, your mind will wander down to sleepy land. And sometimes it might involve the old adage of counting sheep. You don't necessarily have to literally count sheep, but you can just count backwards. Pick a high number and just start counting. In theory, counting to 1. You'll probably never get there, and that's perfectly fine.
Yes, no, you don't want to get to 1. Then you have to start again.
If you did, you were counting way too fast and you were thinking about it too much. Just
You're giving
breathe.
it too much attention.
Right. Just focus on those deep breaths and, count 300, 299. And like you can count at the pace of your breath. That's slow. And eventually you'll bore yourself to sleep.
So it's important to have a routine that sets you up for success, along with tools or supports that provide you with an environment that is conducive to sleep. And I feel like many caregivers turn healing into like another performance. I'm doing it wrong. I can't keep up. I failed at self care. How do you help people avoid that trap?
By providing them, like you kind of mentioned, tools. Like this is your toolbox. If you had a carpenter job, you are not going to utilize every tool in your toolbox for every single job. Right? You might use 1 or 2, and each job requires a different set of tools. And sometimes you might pull out one and like, oh, that was too big and I need a smaller one. It's the same process. We have our set of tools, and sometimes we need to try certain things. It doesn't mean you failed. There's been plenty of times where, like, I went out of town, I left my sleep mask. What was I thinking? Like, how am I going to go back to sleep now? Or how am I going to sleep in this environment that I'm not used to? A lot of us, if we're in a hotel, like, this is different. How am I? It's hard for me to fall asleep in this different environment, or I don't have another warm body in the bed with me, or whatever the case may be. But if you have several tools that you can try, if you don't have the one that usually works, or even if you're not sure which one will work, well, let's try this. Let's see if it will work. And
Mhm.
okay, that did the trick for a little while, but okay, let me try this now. It's the same process, and we'll all get there eventually. But just don't give up on yourself.
So it's about having more than one tool because the tool doesn't necessarily mean that it will be successful every time, depending on what state you're arriving at when you are about to start your day or you're waking up or you're going to sleep. So it's important to understand that not every single tool in your kit will work every single time. And that it's important to have more than one tool that is effective for you that you can rotate when things aren't working so that you don't feel stressed. You can understand that there is grace required when different circumstances arise.
Exactly.
And I want to land this in one small step, something a caregiver can do this week without it becoming like a whole new project. What's one small change a caregiver can try this week that could reduce pain, tension, or improve sleep, even just a little bit?
In general, if they're not ready for the 90-second pause, focusing on the breath. I think the breath is life, right? And if we actually start to practice breathing and Again, you don't have to be an expert in breath work. Just practice those inhales and exhales, counting how long does it take me to expand my lungs and how long can I exhale and actually let out all my breath, and just like try a few different things, like play with it, experiment. There's different types of breathwork activities that you can do. If you want, you can find a few, or you can just see what feels natural for you, inhaling and holding and exhaling. I'm sure there's a lot of people I didn't know there are so many things you can do with with your lungs and breathing, and it can be a fun experiment. But oftentimes, like I was saying before, that's where a lot of the shift will come. You start to circulate the blood flow into those areas that your body is craving, that the oxygen flow to the brain and the muscles and the circulatory system. And then once you learn to breathe properly, you start to shift those cortisol levels and other hormone levels. And like we said before, start to relax and allow your body the opportunity to rest and sleep. And when you're actually getting sleep, there's so many transformations that happen just from that, because your body needs rest in order to recover. That's where that reset happens on a metabolic level. And if we're never getting the proper amount of rest for our metabolisms to reset, that's where we start to hold those chronic issues.
And I think when we look at breath, and we're talking about that there's different ways of engaging our breath, and it can be quite a playful experience, and you can make it into a game. And you can use box breathing, triangular breathing. You could choose any shape and you just go around and you follow the shape. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, and you follow that same pattern again and again, and you can change it into different shapes. You can lengthen the amount of time that you breathe in, you hold, and you breathe out for. I think it's really important that people understand, and especially our caregivers, that there is no right or wrong way to breathe. As long as you are expanding your lungs and you're taking the time to slow it down, you're doing it right no matter what way you decide to proceed with learning your breath work. And I wanted to ask, what would you say to the caregiver who believes rest has to be earned?
If rest has to be earned, then your ability to recover and heal also has to be earned. And we're all entitled to a healthy life. We're all entitled to have the ability to rest and recover and have those resources. We don't have to feel like we're not worthy of it because we came in this world worthy of it. Right, that's our natural given right, if you will, just for being on Earth. And even though we've taken on the responsibility, or we've been given the responsibility, whatever the case may be, of taking care of others, it does not mean that we don't have the right to be taken care of by ourselves, neglect what we're entitled to, which is life. When we neglect those things, we're shortening our lives. We're saying that we don't deserve to be here, essentially. That's what it amounts to, because we're taking away from our ability to survive and function.
I think when we look at it from the perspective of that it has to be earned, if we go right back to our childhood, we didn't earn sleep when we were born. We didn't earn food. We didn't earn time to just be. It was
Right.
just there. It was never,
Exactly.
it's not a conditioned thing when you start this life. It's something that is projected. It's something that is viewed by society depending on the roles. And it's important to acknowledge that this is not the state that we arrived. And it's okay to acknowledge that that state is still there, regardless of outside pressures, outside opinions, and what you've learnt across your life. Because we learn from our parents as well, especially if they have that you have to finish all of your jobs before you get to have a break. We have to acknowledge that sometimes the break has to come before we do the work so that the work can be achieved. If you could leave our listeners with just one sentence to hold on to when their body is screaming, but life still demands more, what would it be?
I would say sit with the discomfort of knowing that all of life's challenges are at your plate, but know that through that awareness, through a holistic practice that is conducive to your lifestyle, all the things will fall into place. All will be taken care of essentially because you're taking care of yourself.
I like that if you take the time, everything will fall into place because you're caring for yourself so that you can care for others. I'd
Right.
like to share where our listeners can connect with you and learn more about the somatic practice that you've been describing today.
The main place you can find me is my website, which is drdaniellegriff.com, as well as if you're on social media, pretty much on almost every platform at Dr. Danielle Griff as well. So pick your preferred social channel and find me there.
And I just wanted to put something gently in. You're also the host of Rise and Renew Retreat. Who is it for, and what can people expect in that kind of immersive environment?
Yeah, this is for the busy individual who needs the opportunity to rest and reset. Maybe they've taken opportunities before, but they struggle with actually resting and resetting when it's time. Maybe they've had a few days of vacation or some time off, and it's not until the end of that time where they actually feel the reset, but then they're immediately going back into that stressful situation, the caretaking, the busy lives. And sometimes it feels like they're worse off than when they left. Playing catch up. Everybody is calling their phone, trying to reach them because they couldn't reach them before. And now they're back at square one. But this retreat is for those who want to be able to rest right away. Leave with the tools so that you can manage your stress, your pain, your anxiety, whatever the case may be after you leave. So you're not back at square one. You have the tools to continue the practice, continue to do the work that felt good for you, and, being able to do it on your own in an environment that's conducive to you. You're not necessarily at a beautiful resort, but now I know I can transfer this from here to there. It doesn't have to be in a spa or a massage room or whatever to feel the relief. Practical, accessible tools that we can use any day in our life to continue to manage when we get home and go back to our normal lives.
And I think that opportunity comes across as something gentle but exciting as well. Can they find that on your website as well about your retreat? Is that where they would locate it?
Yeah, definitely. There's information, a button at the top menu for retreats. You can see more about the dates, some of the activities that we'll be doing that are included, and an opportunity for people to sign up. And I will be looking at some future dates as well.
That's very exciting. And Danielle, I wanted to say a massive thank you for this conversation and for the way you've given language to something so many caregivers live with quietly: pain, tension, insomnia, and the feeling of a body that never truly gets to stand down. I just wanted to recap what we've talked about today: why stress shows up in the jaw, shoulders, gut, and sleep; why nothing is wrong doesn't mean you're fine; how chronic vigilance can create very real body symptoms; and gentle, realistic starting points to begin releasing some of what you're carrying. If you'd like to explore Danielle's work further, I'll link her website and her resources in the show notes, along with the details about her Rise and Renew retreat. And if you're listening and you're in a season where your body is waving that white flag, here's your permission slip. You don't have to earn support. Your needs are part of the care plan too. To everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. You don't have to hold it all alone. I'm Michelle, and this is Radiant Moments. Until next time, take gentle care of your radiant moments and of yourself.